and then clear spells overnight. And with high pressure building from the south for Saturday, actually most places will see a fine day. The best of the sunshine will be in the south, further showers on Sunday.
I'm Darren McCaffrey, and join me on The Briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
A very good afternoon and welcome to The Briefing PM, an hour of the latest political news, debate and analysis here on GB News. I'm in lovely Leeds this afternoon, and here's what's coming up on the programme between now and 4 o'clock. No more fines for the Prime Minister. Boris Johnson escaped sanction by the police despite 126 fines being handed out across Downing Street and Whitehall for those parties during lockdown. But is the Prime Minister now finally off the hook, or are there concerns about Sue Gray's report, which is due to be published next week? The cost of living crisis, that continues to be the big political story, as apparently Downing Street and the Treasury are split on whether to back a windfall tax for the energy companies. But frankly, should the government be doing more? And the war against the civil service, as Jacob Rees-Mogg insists that civil servants should get back behind their desks. The unions are crying foul. We'll be hearing from them a little later in the programme too. As always, please do get in touch, particularly if you live in Leeds or Yorkshire. You know the email address by now, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. We'll be live in Leeds between now and 4. But first, at the top of the hour, here's the news headlines in London.
Thank you, Darren. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson's been told he faces no further action and won't receive a second fine for breaching COVID laws, Number 10 has confirmed. The Met Police has concluded its investigation into alleged breaches of regulations at Downing Street and Whitehall. In total, 126 referrals have been made for fixed penalty notices for breaking lockdown rules during the pandemic. The Met Police has said 83 individuals received fines. 28 of those were given between 2 and 5 referrals. A musician obsessed with serial killers has been jailed for life for the murder of Bobby Ann McLeod in November last year. The 18-year-old was attacked, hit twice in the head with a claw hammer while she waited for a bus in Plymouth. Cody Ackland then put her in his car and bludgeoned her to death in a remote car park on Dartmoor. He'll serve a minimum of 31 years. The Chancellor is under mounting pressure from businesses, charities and MPs to produce a package of support after inflation hit a 40-year high. There are calls for a windfall tax on oil and gas companies that have benefited from high global prices. Rishi Sunak said in a speech last night that the government is prepared to help families coping with rising inflation. That as the Treasury is under increasing pressure to bring benefit and pension rises forward to help those struggling with the cost of living. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he wants the government to do more.
People are really struggling with their bills. Inflation's up, prices are up, wages are down, and the government is imposing tax on them at the same time. And he's got no answers. And he had the opportunity. One of the answers is staring the Prime Minister in the face, a windfall tax to reduce bills by up to £600 for those that most need it on the profits that oil and gas companies didn't expect to make. I think the Prime Minister will U-turn on this, but by the time he's done that, so many people will have struggled with their bills for so much longer.
The United Nations is warning that Russia's invasion of Ukraine could soon cause a global food crisis that may last for years. The UN Secretary-General says the situation could lead to tens of millions of people facing food insecurity and famine. Russia and Ukraine account for nearly a third of global wheat supplies. The wars led to soaring global prices. Antonio Guterres has appealed to Moscow to allow the safe export of grain stored in Ukrainian ports. Meanwhile, Moscow claims that over 750 more Ukrainian fighters have surrendered in the Russian-held port city of Mariupol. Negotiations have been ongoing between the two sides to evacuate soldiers held up in the Azovstal steelworks. According to Russia, it brings the total number of Ukrainian fighters to leave the plant since Monday to 1,730. It's unknown how many remain. Ukrainian officials have declined to comment on the fate of the soldiers. More than 50,000 refugees have arrived in the UK after fleeing the war in Ukraine. Official figures show almost 54,000 people came over under the Family and Homes for Ukraine sponsorship schemes. Around 128,000 applied for visas, but just over half of those who've been issued with one have arrived. The government failed in its duty of care to doctors during the coronavirus pandemic. That's according to the British Medical Association. Its own review into the government's handling of the crisis highlights the lack of personal protective equipment in the early stages. It found that more than 4 in 5 doctors said they didn't feel adequately protected during the first wave of the virus. Royal Mail says it will need to increase its prices and cut costs by more than £350 million amid rising inflation. The firm says it faces higher wage demands and steeper energy and fuel costs. Royal Mail insists no further job losses are planned. That's after announcing in January that 700 managerial positions would go. And the UK's biggest ever lottery winners have been revealed. Joe and Jess Thwaite won a record-breaking £184 million jackpot on a lucky dip ticket. The Gloucester couple, who've been married for 11 years, say they now have time to dream. No doubt. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Leeds for the briefing with Darren.
Rhiannon, thank you very much indeed. Coming up to 7 minutes past 3 o'clock on this Thursday afternoon, we are in Leeds. glorious leads today. Thank you for joining us. We're on TV, of course, online and on your DAB digital radio, part of the fastest growing radio network in the UK. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Let's start with the big political story of the day, and that, of course, is Partygate. There we have it. After months of investigation by the Metropolitan Police, 126 fines have been handed out across Downing Street and Whitehall for parties that took place during the COVID pandemic, during lockdown. Quite extraordinary, some of the figures involved in this. 83 people were issued with fines, with 28 facing between 2 and 5 fines, one person being fined 5 times in total. The investigation cost over £400,000. But in the end, the Prime Minister has only faced one fine, and that was a fine for a surprise birthday party, a party, it must be said, he didn't know anything about. So relief within the Conservative Party, relief within Downing Street, but we are still awaiting, of course, Sue Gray's report into the culture inside Downing Street, which is now expected to be published next week. Let's get the latest on all of this and join our political correspondent Tom Harwood, who's at Westminster for us this afternoon. Good afternoon to you, Tom. In some ways, many people quite surprised by the announcement today from the Met. The expectation, surely amongst many Westminster watchers, was that the Prime Minister was likely to face a fine, but has not.
Well, that's exactly right, Darren. Back when that first fine was announced, the event for which it was announced was seen to be relatively trivial in the grand scale of everything that the Prime Minister was accused of attending. Of course, our newspapers and TV screens were absolutely full of all of these stories of suitcases of wine, of broken swings, of rowdiness and partying and DJs in the basement of Number 10, the building behind me right now. Well, it has to be said that whilst our newspapers and television screens and indeed radio sets were full of those stories, not all of those events were attended by the Prime Minister. Indeed, some of the most gratuitous events, as described in great detail over the last 6 or so months, were happening when the Prime Minister was away from Downing Street, staying at other residences or indeed simply ones that happened further down Whitehall. It's interesting actually to contextualise all of this, to try and help people understand how it is that the Prime Minister could have only received one fixed penalty notice for everything that we've been hearing about, for the over 100 fixed penalty notices that have been handed out. Well, I'm standing here in Downing Street, and actually if we were to pan the camera around for those watching on television, we can see that Downing Street isn't one small house. It's a vast array of different buildings. There's number 11 next to number 10. It goes in connected to number 12 as well. And to swing right back all the other way around, we've got, of course, the famous big shining door of number 10, but it connects round through to number 9 next to it over there. And it also connects through to Whitehall as well, and a number of these events were in Whitehall. This is a sprawling complex rather than just the one house, that one front door that we know so well. So yes, this is a huge workplace, and there were a number of events that were judged to have broken the rules, but as I say, the Prime Minister receiving just one fixed penalty notice, which came as a surprise to many, because of course there were a couple of other events that the Prime Minister was in attendance at that clearly he has been judged to not have broken rules at. I'm sure there'll be people poring over all of the details and asking questions of the Metropolitan Police, but we must remember the particular circumstance of number 10. This is, of course, someone's home as well as a workplace for hundreds of people. No wonder this was an extensive investigation carried out over the course of many months to get where we are today.
Indeed, Tom, but we are also, aren't we, expecting Sue Gray's report next week. Suggestions that could be damaging about the leadership inside number 10, right up to the top. But ultimately, politically now, the Prime Minister seems much safer than he has done really since before Christmas.
That's certainly the case, and of course there'll be lots of detail in Sue Gray's report. Remember, when the interim Sue Gray report was published not so long ago, just as this Met Police investigation started back in January of this year, we got a glimpse of the sort of issues of culture within Number 10 and across Whitehall, but we hadn't got all of the detail. Indeed, many of the events weren't spoken about at all. Sue Gray felt that she couldn't publish anything that was under active investigation. So we're expecting next week to get this huge investigation in full, this Cabinet Office investigation that has interviewed many people who attended many of these events, and we'll get a picture of what it was like, much more of a picture than we receive just through the binary did they get a fixed penalty notice or didn't they get a fixed penalty notice dichotomy. We will see a much greater deal of detail, and crucially, once Sue Gray's report has been published, the Prime Minister has promised to return to the House of Commons and finally, once and for all, not be able to respond to questions with we have to wait for the police investigation or we have to wait for Sue Gray's report. All of that will be over. All of that will be done, and the Prime Minister will face up to these questions that have been asked of him, will face up to the questions of detail and respond in a way that I think we haven't seen up until now. It'll be a chance for the Prime Minister to be more candid about what clearly went wrong with the culture of leadership for so many of these events in Number 10.
OK, as always, Tom, great analysis. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Tom Holworth, our political correspondent from Westminster. Well, I'm in Leeds today, where I had a chance a little bit earlier to speak to the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, about Partygate, about his response to those fines, about the questions that he still faces, of course, under investigation by Durham police, and indeed about whether we should all kind of frankly move on from this and focus on the cost of living crisis. Let's have a look.
120 fines in Downing Street for law breaking when the Prime Minister said all laws were followed. That's a culture that the Prime Minister has responsibility for. But do I want to see the Prime Minister focusing on the cost of living crisis? Yes, that's why we pressed a vote on the windfall tax, because what we want to see is up to £600 taken off the energy bills of people across the country, those most in need, paid for by a windfall tax on the profits that the oil and gas companies in the North Sea didn't expect to make. That's a practical answer to the most pressing question. What did the Prime Minister do? He voted it down, and he's got nothing to say to the people who are tossing and turning in their beds, unable to know how they're going to pay their bills.
I do want to ask about cost of living, but just on this, I mean, are you still calling for the Prime Minister to resign? We've got the results now of the Met investigation.
My view of the Prime Minister hasn't changed. Of course, after an investigation that shows 120 plus breaches of the law in Downing Street, of course he should resign. He's responsible for the culture. He also needs to focus on the cost of living crisis, because people are really struggling with their bills. Inflation's up, prices are up, wages are down, and the government is imposing tax on them at the same time. And he's got no answers. And he had the opportunity. One of the answers is staring the Prime Minister in the face, a windfall tax to reduce bills by up to £600 for those that most need it, on the profits that oil and gas companies didn't expect to make. I think the Prime Minister will U-turn on this, but by the time he's done that, so many people will have struggled with their bills for so much longer.
Considering the Prime Minister was fined for a party he didn't know anything about, are you concerned that actually the police may well fine you in the end?
There was no breach of the rules by me or anybody in my team. I'm confident about that, and therefore there's no comparison to be made here.
OK, let's talk about cost of living in the sense that what Labour seemingly want to do is give people more money, frankly. But isn't the economic reality of that is that you risk making things worse? You risk actually inflating inflation, if you like.
What Labour wants to do is to help people with their energy bills. And I've had no end of people saying to me, struggling people saying, I can't even put my heating on. I skip meals now because I can't afford to pay my bills. Something needs to be done about that. The oil and gas companies in the North Sea made more profit than they were expecting because of the high global prices. They've said themselves, we've got more money than we know what to do with. We say use that money to reduce the energy bills of people by up to £600 for those that need it most. That is a practical step. It's staring the Prime Minister in the face. He doesn't know what to do. I think he's going to U-turn on this. He's going to see the sense in Labour's plan, but by dithering and delaying, he's forcing people to struggle when they don't need to do so.
But you get this idea. I mean, it's basic economics. Is that the more money there is in the system, the more money people potentially have, that you could make inflation so much worse. That if we want to tackle inflation, there has to be some economic pain.
This is a simple proposal to take the excess profits from oil and gas companies by way of a windfall tax and use it to help people reduce their bills by up to £600 for those that need it most. In the middle of a cost of living crisis, when so many people are struggling, I think it is an obvious, practical Labour proposal. I do think the government is going to U-turn on this. At the moment, they're like headless chickens. Sometimes they rule it in, sometimes they rule it out. The Cabinet is completely all over the place on it. Those people who are struggling with their bills can't afford this government of dither and delay. They need action, and Labour's put that plan on the table. All the Prime Minister needs to do is to pick it up, vote with us, and it could actually reduce the bills of millions of people across the country.
That was Keir Starmer speaking to me a little bit earlier. GB Views at GBNews.uk, whether you agree with him or not. Let's bring in the Conservative MP for North West Leicestershire now. That is Andrew Bridgen, who joins us down the line. Good afternoon to you, Andrew. Were you surprised the Prime Minister wasn't fined again by the Met?
Well, it's certainly considerably better than many were predicting with regard to the total number of fines for the Prime Minister. So Sue Gray coming out next week, if he can survive that. And then, of course, you've got standards and privileges looking into the matter of what the Prime Minister said in Parliament. But it's a lot better situation for the Prime Minister than I think anyone was predicting.
So you still think there are risks potentially for the Prime Minister going forwards? Sorry, you just got to... I think we're struggling to hear Andrew there. Are we struggling to hear Andrew? OK, I think we can go back to Andrew. Andrew, sorry, I was just asking that you clearly think that this is not over, frankly, that the Prime Minister still faces questions and still politically is at risk.
It's not over, and it's over. And ultimately, the Met can come to whatever conclusions they want. The Prime Minister, like the rest of people who are in politics, will be judged by the court of public opinion, and that will influence what the parliamentary party think. But it's considerably better position than anybody I know predicted the Prime Minister would be in at the end of the police investigation.
Do you regret calling for him to resign then earlier on this year?
I think at the time, given what we knew and bearing in mind, the rawness of the lockdown, I think that was a reasonable call. But time has moved on since then. I think the Prime Minister has performed well under the pressure of the situation in Ukraine. We've now got the cost of living crisis, and I think that's probably taking precedence. I think the Treasury are going to have to act. I don't think there's any excuse for any unprecedented times. And when we know there's going to be huge increases, inflation-linked increases next April to benefits and pensions, and those who rely on them, that's going to be their income. I think given the current situation, there's got to be something done very, very shortly.
Well, you're talking about that cost of living crisis. I mean, would you back Labour's plan for this windfall tax on energy companies?
I'm not sure that when we're looking for people to invest in oil and gas, to exploit our natural reserves, given the pressure we're under, avoiding taking those resources from Russia, that punishing people who are making a good profit is necessarily the way forward. I've also heard varying reports, and I'd like to see the figures, that the Labour's proposed windfall tax wouldn't bring in anything like £600 per household. So basically, I'm not a supporter of it, and indeed I voted against it last night.
In saying that, you frankly, I think, seem to suggest that something needs to be done. You know, there are a lot of people finding this all terribly desperate. What's your solution? What would you like to see Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson do?
Well, as I've already said, I mean, because of the inflation rate this year, it's going to trigger a very large increase in pensions and benefits next April. Well, the fact is that those who are relying on those pensions and benefits, they need the cash now. And we are on unprecedented times. We've got the highest inflation rate for 30 years. And I also think that, you know, those who are on universal credit who can't work because of illness or disability, the changes to the taper helped those who can work to keep more of their money. When the government took the extra £20 a week off that was paid over during the COVID pandemic, but it didn't help those who can't work. And I think we should at least put back the £20 a week on universal credit for those individuals.
OK, and just very finally, Andrew, while I've got you, Labour today essentially calling for the Conservative Party to withdraw the whip to effectively name this Conservative MP who's been arrested on suspicion of rape. Do you agree with that? Do you agree that in these unusual circumstances that's what should happen?
Well, we have a presumption of innocence until proven guilty in this country, and I think it's something we should maintain. Ultimately, we know that the individual concern's not going to be coming to Parliament, and I think that's a reasonable situation to proceed in until any investigation is finalised.
OK, Andrew Bridgen, as always, appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Conservative MP there. Andrew Bridgen joining us down the line. OK, you're watching GB News. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes talking about whether civil servants should get back to work or back to the office as Jacob Rees-Mogg goes to war with the civil service. We'll be speaking to the unions who think it's entirely unnecessary. That and much more just a couple of minutes live from Leeds.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Very welcome back to GB News, live from Leeds this afternoon. But we're going to talk about the civil service. There's quite a few of them based actually in this city. Jacob Rees-Mogg has been going around suggesting that they all need to stop working from home and get back into the office. He's been putting notes on civil service desks demanding they get back. But frankly, would it make any difference to productivity? The unions seem to think not. Let's bring in Mike Clancy. He's the General Secretary at the Prospect Trade Union. Very good afternoon to you, Mike. Frankly, working from home, it seems quite a reasonable thing to many, but there are questions about productivity at home, aren't there, about just precisely what people do get up to when they're not in the office?
Well, what's been interesting in the last few weeks is Prospect is a union that represents people in the public service and the private sector. Most of our members are actually in the private sector. And I've had so many private sector employers ask me, what's going on with government? Why are they putting front and centre the question of location over outputs? Now, we don't promote the idea that public service is something that's exclusively done from home. We're having good conversations at a departmental level about hybrid working. And many of our members do things for government. They're technical civil servants, they're professional civil servants who've got comparator job types in the private sector, actually. And they've been going into office environments or going to assets or infrastructure throughout the pandemic. So this is a caricature, and I think it's a diversion, as is, to a degree, but it's very serious, the 91,000 job loss announcement.
In saying that, do you think that people do work as well from home as if they're in the office, particularly people who've maybe just starting out in the civil service? Many would argue being part of that team, learning from more senior people who've been around for a long time is fundamental, and that can't be achieved from working from home.
Look, there's nobody who understands the labour market, job types and working environments who should say that one size fits all. And the experience of working from home in the public and private sector has been mixed. Many people have found it beneficial, particularly to work hybridly. Our evidence, and it's from public polling as well as membership polling, is that people want to blend. Some people have experienced extensions of their working day. They've experienced some surveillance. And definitely this is a generational issue. Some people younger at the earlier part of their career, maybe in multiple occupancy, will find working from home a more unattractive prospect. Other people may find it works for their lifestyle at the point they are in their career. The thing about this is actually employers know that they now need to think about this carefully. Private sector employers are. What we can't work out, although we suspect it's because of diversion, why Jacob Rees-Mogg has been known for putting the notices up on notice boards. Incidentally, a few years back, he was actually a proponent of slimming the office estate of government by flexible working, and I'm sure we'll engage with him on that when we eventually meet him on the question of the 91,000 job cuts. So our view is that it should be tailored to the environment that people work in. And what we should have is a broader conversation about flexibility, because working from home can be available for some people, but probably only about 20 to 25% of the workforce. Flexibility is a much bigger issue.
Indeed it is, but also the government would probably argue, wouldn't they, that this is not just about what's good for the individual, but also what's good for the wider economy. And if more people are working from home, it means fewer train journeys, it means fewer people having lunch out, which has a big, massive impact on the wider economy.
Well, look, there is an interdependency, but what is not going to happen here is employers and working environments turning into some form of latter-day King-Canutes. What you need to do is to recognise that change has happened as a result of the pandemic. Some of it good, some of it needs to be understood over a longer period, and we need to see how things settle down. There's, to some extent at the minute, a form of not only medical long COVID, but organisational long COVID. You know, if you look at the some sectors where they're short of labour, aviation is one that immediately comes to mind. Organisations are just beginning to recover from what have been quite traumatic conditions. So what we will have to see is how some of the things we've learned in the last 2 years actually become a feature of the future, or whether they prove to be a point in time and they weren't as durable as we actually expected as they happened. I think notions of flexibility, people being able to balance their responsibilities but also deliver well for work, is here to stay. And what really government should be doing is setting the pace on this, as opposed to looking actually like it's Luddite and the private sector looking at them and saying, why are you behaving like this with your own workforce? You see, a lot of the people I represent do have private sector competitors, and if the private sector's offering flexibility and better pay, then it's going to be difficult to get the talent you need in the public sector in the future.
OK, Mike Clancy, really appreciate your time this afternoon from the Prospect Trade Union. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. What do you make about working from home? GB Views at gbnews.uk. Lots of you have been getting in touch about cost of living, about Partygate. Andrew says Rishi Sunak may have been a financial whiz kid, but he's been a lousy politician. This is on the cost of living crisis. Paul says what this government has got really, really wrong is the amount of our money they've wasted with little forethought on how we're going to manage after they've done so. And someone else has got in touch saying that they could, people, tackle the cost of living crisis by cutting their Netflix subscription, tobacco, alcohol. That would save a few quid a month. What do you make about that? As I say, always get in touch. You can tweet us also at GB News. Coming up in the next 30 minutes or so, we've got lots more coming up, including an interview with the South Yorkshire Mayor, and we're going to be talking about kind of the scandal at Westminster, if you like, the impact that's had on our politics. Has it damaged your trust in politicians? But before all of that, let's bring you up to date with the very latest news just after 3:30.
Thanks, Darren. It's 3:35. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Boris Johnson's been told that he won't receive a second fine for breaching COVID laws. The Met Police has now concluded its investigation into parties at Downing Street and Whitehall at a cost of £460,000. A total of 126 referrals have been made for fixed penalty notices. A musician obsessed with serial killer Ted Bundy has been jailed for life for the murder of Bobby Ann McLeod. The 18-year-old was hit twice in the head with a claw hammer while she waited for a bus in Plymouth in November last year. Cody Ackland later bludgeoned her to death in a remote car park on Dartmoor. He'll serve a minimum of 31 years. Number 10 denies blocking the Treasury from imposing a windfall tax on oil and gas giants. The Prime Minister's official spokesman has acknowledged reports of division between the departments, but insists Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak are aligned on the issue. The Chancellor's under mounting pressure from businesses, charities and MPs to produce a package of support after inflation hit a 40-year high. The United Nations is warning that Russia's invasion of Ukraine could soon cause a global food crisis that may last for years. The UN Secretary-General says the situation could lead to tens of millions of people facing food insecurity and famine. Russia and Ukraine account for nearly a third of global wheat supplies. The war's led to soaring global prices. And the UK's biggest ever lottery winners have been revealed. Joe and Jess Thwaite won a record-breaking £184 million jackpot on a lucky dip ticket. The Gloucester couple, who've been married for 11 years, say they now have time to dream. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back and welcome to GB News, the briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey. It is 22 minutes to 4 o'clock on this Thursday afternoon. We're on TV, online and on your DAB digital radio. Thank you very much indeed for your company from glorious, glorious Leeds. Absolute stonking day here. We are, of course, in West Yorkshire, but a little bit earlier on, I had a chance to speak to the newly elected mayor of South Yorkshire. That's Oliver Copart. He was elected a couple of weeks ago during those local elections, you may have remembered, earlier on in May. He succeeds Dan Jarvis, who's the previous incumbent. Labour managed to hold on to the mayorship of South Yorkshire. And I kind of began by asking him essentially what he thought he had done to win, essentially, again for the Labour Party.
I hope what people saw from me was that we can make a difference to everyday life. Like, we can help people. You know, we're here at a bus depot, a park and ride here today. Labour mayors can help people with the cost of living through affecting change around transport. So making sure that the bus network works more effectively, that the fares are reduced, and that's the difference that Labour can make in power here in the regions.
And when you talk about the kind of cost of living crisis, clearly it's the number one issue, isn't it, with the people that you represent, but everyone else around the country. What are you seeing on a kind of day-to-day basis where people are frankly struggling?
Yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking, some of the things that you hear in the stories about people making some really difficult decisions about how they live their lives. It's clear for me that the government aren't doing enough. That's the first thing, and the government could make a significant difference to people's lives if they wanted to. They've chosen not to. But in South Yorkshire, for instance, we're trying to do things like we're extending free park and ride services so that people can park their car for free. We're keeping our 18 to 21 pass so that people can have cheaper bus fares. The things that we can do, we are doing. We need the government to step up and make that change too.
Whereas the Labour Party's position with voters here, you know, the kind of northern wall, if you like, and traditional Labour heartlands. I mean, there is still a sense, we got that, didn't we, in the local elections, that Labour's not won back many of those voters.
Well, I think quite rightly, we're not complacent, and we are showing people, partly through the work that the mayors are doing, partly obviously through the work that Keir and Lisa and others are doing in London, that we're going to deliver for our community. So I think people now are giving us a hearing. I think people are listening to us, and I think people are prepared to give us a chance. But we've got to take that opportunity, and we've got to show people what difference Labour can make. And that's what we're getting on and doing.
But what is that difference? I mean, because many ways, the Conservative Party have spent an awful lot of money over the last couple of years. They seem like a centre-left government to many in some regards. What is the differentiation?
Well, they haven't spent an awful lot of money in my community. So in South Yorkshire, we asked for, as part of their Bus Back Better fund, which was supposed to be £3 billion, we asked for 435 million to improve public transport in and across South Yorkshire. They turned us down and didn't give us a single penny, and the fund itself turned out to be just 1.2 billion. So I'm not sure they are spending as much as they would have people believe. What we can do is get on and make a difference to people's lives. So in South Yorkshire, we're working on a clean energy strategy to bring down bills. We're working on the bus franchising assessment so that we can do what Andy Burnham is doing in Manchester and bring buses back under public control. So in all those ways and more, we're trying to get on with the job, but we need a government in London that are going to have as much ambition for us and our communities as we have for ourselves.
And just very finally, people will ask this because we saw in Bristol they decided to vote to get rid of the elected mayor. Why do you think elected mayors are necessary? They're still relatively new. Do you think you and others really do make an actual difference?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we make a huge difference. So the Bristol mayor that was just recently, well, the system that was just voted out, was the city mayor. We're metro mayors. There is a big difference. The metro mayor's job is to have a strategic view of how to develop an economy, how to help communities in the longer term. And I think we can make a huge difference when it comes to that long-term strategic plan for our economies. So things like making sure we have a better economy, not just a bigger economy, making sure that we attract the inward investment, the jobs, the growth in the new industries of the future. That's what we can do as mayors. We can shout about our regions, we can be advocates and champions for our regions. That's what I'm doing in South Yorkshire, and I know that's what the other Labour mayors are doing too.
That was Oliver Copard, the new mayor for South Yorkshire, speaking to me a little bit earlier on here in Leeds. Now let's move on to obesity, because the problem, no pun intended, is getting bigger, much bigger. 42 million adults in the UK are set to be either overweight or obese by 2040. 71% of people will be overweight by 2040, of which 36 will be obese. 21 million people, quite extraordinary figures. Let's speak to an NHS doctor, that's Dr. Daniel Ollier, who joins us down the line now from London. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. It is quite worrying, isn't it, about how obesity is massively on the rise, the continued rise right across the UK?
Absolutely. Darren, you said it yourself. You know, it's a huge problem. It's a big problem. And it's a problem that we need to face and we need to tackle. I think it's important that we look at the reason why this has happened and we attack each of those points, you know, that have caused it. It's also about education, and it's also about the public perception of obesity. It's not okay to be obese. It's a problem, and it can be a disease. There's, you know, many reasons for people to be obese, and, you know, it's important that we look at each of them, you know, in a case-to-case, you know, basis. But it is an issue, and people can't accept that it's okay to be obese because it's not.
In saying that, when you say it's okay to be obese and it's not, that's in many ways true, but what's the solution? Is it, frankly, public shaming to a degree, or making people feel uncomfortable about the weight?
It's really controversial, and it's really, really tough, because in this culture that we have today, we really take into account mental health and acceptance of how people are, and self-confidence, and those things are very, very important. But they shouldn't be at the expense of, keeping healthy and having a diet and being responsible for not neglecting yourself. It is a form of neglect, being unhealthy and eating the wrong things and having, those type of habits. It is self-neglect. Now, if you think about the other countries in Europe, Sweden, Germany, France, the Western European countries that we should compare ourselves to, because that's where we are, similar demographics, similar way of life. We're by far the worst. So in about 2018, we were fourth most obese nation in Europe. That was next to Turkey, Malta, and Hungary. And we're very far away from them. We don't have similar lifestyles to them if you compare us to Western Europe, okay? So I think that kind of tells you what you need to know, that we are seriously underperforming. And it's about really understanding what makes up that. Now, if you think about our lifestyles and what we have around us, number one, we are well educated. We push this idea of keeping healthy, drinking water, doing exercise from a very, very early age. That's very, very important. There's adverts all the time on TV about telling us what we need to do, but it's just a responsibility that people aren't taking. And this, of course, is compounded by the cost of living issue, which is getting worse. It's a lot cheaper to eat unhealthy food than it is to have healthy food. Of course, there's cost associated with exercising as well and going to the gym and those type of things. But it's about responsibility. For the first time ever, I would say it's the easiest to get out and do something. Everyone has Fitbits, everyone has Apple Watches. I'm very passionate, as you can see. This is something very close to my heart because I see this on a day-to-day basis in the hospital. I see the end product of this, and it's not ugly, and it's not nice, and it's a huge issue.
But you seem to be suggesting that it's much more, or should be much more, driven by kind of personal responsibility than the responsibility of the government, because there's been criticism of the government not, for example, banning junk food adverts at certain times of the day, and that they could be more proactive.
Absolutely. So take an average, let's say, 18 to 30-year-old. The media that they're intake is mostly from social media, perhaps watching TV online, Netflix, hardly ever sort of TV on TV. So if you think about the adverts on TV, that's a very small subsection. We're seeing adverts everywhere, and they're not really well regulated. So blaming and putting all the onus on the government, I don't think that's the right thing to do, because they don't have control over all media outlets that people, middle-aged people, young adults, kids, actually have access to. And I just don't think it's fair to put it on the government. We have a responsibility ourselves, and I think that's where it is. I think it's a social, deception and a way of thinking which we have to attack. That actually it's not okay, and it's our responsibility. And at the end of the day, as a society, we are going to suffer because of it.
Indeed. It is quite shocking, those numbers. Daniel, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Daniel Ollier there, NHS doctor, join us down the line from London. Thank you. Let's turn back to politics and to Westminster, because there's calls today, not least of all from the Labour Party, for that Conservative MP who's been arrested on suspicion of historical rape. He should effectively have the whip withdrawn by the Conservative Party, which would effectively mean that his name was made public. But it speaks, doesn't it, about wider cultural problems inside Westminster, so-called Pestminster as it's been branded. Let's bring in the Liberal Democrat MP Christine Jardine, who joins us down the line. Christine, thank you as always for joining us. Clearly we're not just the only people trying to talk to you. Just give us your opinion first of all about Labour's suggestion that effectively this MP should be named.
I don't have any comment. I want to get involved in any way in the discussion about an MP who is at the centre of allegations, and there is a criminal case. The criminal case will take place, and that it will be investigated, and it will be held in court. Whether or not the whip is withdrawn, I think it's important that we respect the law in this. And let the legal authorities deal with it. As I understand it, the MP is not going to be at Westminster. Withdrawing the whip, I think in these situations, other parties have done that. And so it probably would be the correct thing to do.
Okay, interesting stuff. Let's talk about the wider culture, though. And as you say, we're obviously confined in what we can say about that particular case. We shouldn't get involved in it for legal reasons. No. The wider culture is that there is a perception here in Leeds and indeed elsewhere that there's something rotten, frankly, at the heart of Parliament, at the heart of Westminster, that almost every week, every month, there are new allegations. Do you think that's an unfair assessment because of the scrutiny, or do you think there is something rotten at the heart of the culture at Westminster?
I think it's fair that we're scrutinised. I think it's fair that we're held to a high standard. And I think when people fall below that standard, I think it's fair that they are held to account for it. Whether or not Westminster is any worse than anybody else, I don't know. But yes, we have seen so many incidents recently, so many people being investigated, that I think something has to be done, but it is a wider problem which also affects society. And in some ways, the issues that we have at Westminster reflect issues which continue to be a problem in society. Misogyny as a hate crime is something that I feel very strongly about, that we should be pursuing, that we should be making it clear that certain types of behaviour are completely unacceptable in whatever setting. And, you know, that we should be, for example, Baroness Helena Kennedy looks at this for the Scottish Parliament, and she brought forward suggestions for a law on misogyny separate from other laws. And I think it would be useful, I haven't actually had a chance to speak to her about this, but I think it would be useful if we had something similar at Westminster. And we should be taking the lead in tackling misogyny, sex crimes, sexual assault allegations, bullying, and general harassment. We should be taking a lead on it.
I suppose what I'm trying to get at, only because there's a debate I think people are genuinely having at the moment, is it, or does politics attract people who, for whatever reason, whatever characteristics, are more likely to get themselves into trouble and to do things that clearly some would judge as inappropriate and many things that are illegal? Or is it that we scrutinise Westminster so much that actually it is just like the rest of our society, but we know about it so much more because it's constantly under a microscope?
I think we have to be very careful before we start assuming that everybody, or even all, or a lot of people in politics are behaving badly. I think that's a very dangerous route to go down. Have there been incidents recently that are being investigated, or incidents that people have been held to account for? Yes, of course they have. Obviously, in the present culture, we want, in the present moment, we want anything like that clamped down on, not just in Westminster, but in society. So, no, I don't think it's something about politicians in general. I think that's a sweeping statement. And I think that we have a problem in society with our attitudes that we have to deal with. Should we be scrutinised and make sure that we're holding up to acceptable standards? Yes, of course we should. And if we fall short of them, then we have to be held to account.
Okay, Christine, Jardine, always appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for joining us. Thank you, Christine. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay, we're, as I say, in Leeds today. Really important, of course, that we talk to local politicians, not just politicians based at Westminster. Delighted to say the Councillor James Lewis, who is the leader of Leeds City Council, joins me this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, James. First of all, can we just reflect a little bit on what happened here in the local elections a couple of weeks ago? You guys did reasonably well, but not probably as well as Labour need to be doing. Is that fair?
We had a gain of 5 seats for the Labour group in Leeds. We took seats off the Conservative Party that some of them have never had Labour councillors before. So we saw some progress in Leeds. It wasn't just about the Conservative Party. We took seats off the Greens and Liberal Democrats as well. So we're seeing in Leeds people seeing the Labour Party, seeing what we do locally in the city, and the party as a strong voice for them and standing up for the city.
And what are the kind of big issues here when you talk to your constituents and other people? I mean, we've been talking about Partygate today. Lots of people seem quite bored of that. The cost of living crisis is quite key.
The cost of living crisis is at the front of everybody's minds. When we were out campaigning for the local elections, it was all we were hearing from people. Just whether it's the price of the weekly shop going up, the price of fuel going up for people that need to drive to get around, and also and it affects everybody. People in work, pensioners who thought they could plan on the works pension, on the state pension, now seeing all those figures going out the window. It was a big issue for people in Leeds. We've also been badly let down by the government over investment in infrastructure as well. We've got a poor bus service, we've got a poor quality train service. The government don't seem to know what they want to do about that as well, and I think that was a big issue for us in Leeds.
And just very finally, looking at how you did in those local elections, is there a sense that, you know, we talk about the red wall, don't we, and people who've drifted away from Labour in recent years. I mean, are you really winning enough of them back? You're winning some of them back, but enough of them back that Labour could genuinely mount a challenge at the next election?
When we look in Leeds, we saw one of the seats held by our Conservatives MPs. We took 3 seats off the Conservatives in that parliamentary constituency. We are seeing people come to Labour. In what might be classed as the red wall areas, the old mining villages, like the area I'm a councillor for, our majority was huge. Other seats where the Conservatives thought they had a chance, there was a big swing to Labour and we held on to seats. So we are seeing people coming back to Labour in local elections in Leeds.
Okay, James, appreciate your time this afternoon. Delightful. Look at this, the canal here, Leeds docks. Thank you very much indeed, James Lewis there, joining us this afternoon. Okay, well, that is it from me, from Leeds, and indeed for the briefing for today. Arlene Foster, of course, here at 3 o'clock tomorrow, well, I should say, from London. Up next, it's Bev Turner standing in for Colin Brazier. Stay tuned for that between 4 and 6. But we'll leave you with the weather, and I think it's pretty good most places. I'll see you soon.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Following the excitement of last night's thunderstorms, there have been a few more showers today, but actually most places are dry with sunny spells, and high pressure ridging up from the south has allowed for light winds. So a pleasant end to Thursday for the vast majority, but the low out to the northwest will bring some more showers in during the next few days. We keep the clear spells into the evening for much of England and Wales, eastern and southern Scotland as well. Cloud coming and going for western Scotland, Northern Ireland, the showers easing off and then perhaps returning for the far northwest later in the night. And then the cloud thickens from the south during the early hours, with temperatures in the south 11 or 12 Celsius, further north 9 to 11 generally. So it's a cloudy but also damp start to Friday as rain makes an appearance. Central southern England initially, and then some heavier and more persistent rain for a time towards the southeast. Meanwhile, further west and north, showers or longer spells of rain move in from the west. And western Scotland seeing the most damp weather. It will also feel cool. 16 for Glasgow, 17 for Aberdeen, 19 for London. There'll be some bright weather in between the showers, but I think for Scotland, northern England, we'll see more persistent rain, a spell of rain for an hour or two as we go into the evening. That then clears away, clear spells for many to start off the night, and we'll see just a few showers for western Scotland, but otherwise mostly dry.